Policy and Finance Committee meeting this morning, the 11th of July. No mai haere mai. Don't forget we are streaming live, so if you could just move your microphones in and speak into the microphone so everybody listening from afar can hear clearly what we're going to be discussing this morning. We've got members of the public here as well, so welcome to you all this morning. No mai haere mai. Now, our mobile phones, please put them out of sight or on mute, just so that you're not head down on your phones rather than paying attention. So now, we do have some apologies this morning, quite a number in fact. Apologies from Councillor Sturt, Councillor Tapsell, Mr Berryman Camp, Mr Thomas and Mrs Mohi. Any further apologies? No. So may I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Gould. Thank you, Councillor Maxwell, that the apologies be accepted. Moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you. Any declarations of interest this morning? Carl, thank you. Any urgent items not on the agenda? Oh, Councillor Gould, surprise, surprise. Good morning. Yes, Councillor Gould.
Good morning, Madam Chair. As you are aware, I attended a local government New Zealand conference in Wellington.
That's right.
And I spoke to 3 personnel from New Zealand Transport Agency, and I advised them the state of our...
Point of order, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Councillor,
Yes.
Yes. We're to do a report on attendance. There were many other councillors there as well. It is inappropriate for you to bring up something, especially a conversation, at a council meeting without actually doing a summary report, as we do after attendance at every conference.
Okay. I wasn't going to bring up anything about that up. I was just bringing up about the expertise of the person I spoke to, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Yes. Well, perhaps you might like to include that if you in the report from the conference.
So,
any observations perhaps you might like to include in your own report back to council?
can I Road?
Yes. Briefly, please.
I believe that Tino Road has failed because of the amount of patches.
Right. Well, thank you very much. I think that's not an urgent item, is it, Councillor Gould?
It's a matter whether the NZTA will pay for it, and it's a case that the road will fail again in the near distance future. And it's a case of council being aware that we need to start negotiating with NZTA.
Thank you for raising it. It is not an urgent item for this meeting. Thank you. So we'll carry on. Oh, sorry, Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd just like to inquire, Councillor Sturt's in hospital, had operations. Does anyone know how he is?
Oh, thank you. Yes, I understand the Mayor, you can give us an update. Thank you.
Thank you, and nice that you asked. He's come successfully through his surgery. Yesterday, councillors and the executive team sent him flowers, and he's coming home to Rotorua today.
Oh, thank you.
So, feeling quite chipper.
Oh, thank you for that. It's good to hear Councillor Charles Sturt is coming back home. That's good. Very good to hear. Thank you. So, thank you. I'm not sure if our meeting's going to be short or long today because we don't have too much on the agenda, do we? So, right. Confirmation, item 4, confirmation of our minutes. The minutes of our Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting held on the 13th of June. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Thank you, Mrs Trumper. Now, any changes, amendments to our minutes? No, I'll put that motion then. All those in favour that the minutes are true, confirmed as true and correct. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. Staff reports, recommendation 1. This is the progress, a revised rates remission and postponement policy to encourage inner city development. May I have a mover and a seconder to receive that report, please? Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Thank you, Councillor Maxwell. I'll put that motion. All those in favour that we receive the report? Thank you. Thank you, carried. Good morning, Henry.
Good morning, Madam Chair, and kia ora koutou, councillors and board members. So look, I'll take the paper as read, but before we sort of go on to a discussion and questions, I'm quite keen to take you on a little bit of the journey really since 2013, and just to give you a little bit of context behind where the paper's come from. And I guess starting back in 2013, you'll remember the state of the inner city at that time and the concern about particularly the high vacancy levels. And that led to priority really being put by this council on inner city revitalisation. And at that stage there was a policy strategy developed around that revitalisation work. Fundamentally over the 3 or 4 years after that, the focus was really on those areas where the council had quite a lot of control over what could happen. So there was a focus really on the environment, the gardens, on the roads and footpaths. There was an emphasis around trying to drive stronger activation, and more recently there's obviously been a bit of a focus as well on lifting the security levels and trying to improve the sense of safety in the inner city. And I think we've seen quite a change in the city since that time, but we're not there yet. And so what the other piece of work that went on over the last few years was the development of the spatial plan. And that was really the long-term planning exercise, looking at our district and highlighting those areas which were particularly significant for us and for the people we serve. And one of the areas was obviously the inner city. And what the spatial plan essentially highlighted was that as well as the short-term fixes, if you like, which we'd focused on, there were also longer-term, probably what I'd call structural issues which need to be addressed. And that was particularly around the size of the footprint in the inner city, and particularly the size of the retail footprint. What we're seeing really here and across the whole country is that inner cities are becoming smaller. The days of huge retail footprints in the inner city they're gone really. And the other thing that was identified was that there's an opportunity for us, and fundamentally looking at some change of use in the inner city, and probably with a focus on the accommodation sector and residential apartments. So those were the longer term issues that the spatial plan identified as needing to be addressed. And I guess what this paper fundamentally is saying to you as councillors, at the moment we've got some tools in the toolkit to drive improvement in the inner city, but what we're suggesting is the need to start discussions with particularly developers and building owners in town about how we can, ease their way to investing more in this place. So we've had initial discussions, again, as I say, in the paper says, with developers. We've had conversations with the Chamber of Commerce, and I can see John and Bryce here. And they've been highlighting really what they see as an opportunity in terms of encouraging investment in town, and looking particularly at the option of a rates remission policy. And so what we've done really in putting together this paper is we've had those discussions, we've looked around the country to see what else is going on in other centres, and we've seen a number of examples where other councils around the country have put in place incentives to drive reinvestment into their places. And interestingly, we've also seen a number of other options which are being looked at by councils in terms of incentives around driving economic development, employment, and even housing through similar policies. But the focus here at the moment is around the potential of picking up some of those policies for the inner city. So what we're really asking you as a council is for your okay to get out and get talking and have the conversations that need to be had, and to put together essentially a set of options to bring back to the new council either at the end of this year or in the new year. And as I said, fundamentally it's about trying new things, and it's about trying to expand the tools we've got in the toolkit. Where I started, we've got really control of the public spaces at the moment as being the principal tools we've got. This is about potentially expanding into another area where we've got some ability to encourage, and that's through rates remission policies. So really open for questions.
Thank you very much, Henry. One thing is we mustn't shy away from trying new things, so thank you for the report. Your Worship.
Thank you, Henry. So is this wrapped up as well with that second generation approach that we're looking at with CBD, and about that we covered off before about parking and speed limits and treatments of intersections? Is this just now enabling that second step of, it's a new generation really that needs to emerge?
Yeah, look, what we're suggesting is the need for a new set of tools, a new generation of work. And where I started really was saying those elements you were talking about, which include parking, which include the intersections, those are all areas that we do have the ability to control, and we've used those levers, I think, really quite effectively in making the city a better place to be. This is really looking at what I would call the wider structural issue of the inner city, which need the development of different tools. We don't own a lot of buildings in town. Really, one of the other big tools we've got is around rates. Yeah.
And just a further question on that. Do we know now how many out-of-town landlords there are of buildings? Because that's the criticism we get. Some of them look shabby, need, council get in there and smarten it up, but we aren't owners of those buildings. So do we have that inventory of out-of-town landlords?
We will have it. I don't know. I'd be guessing if I said. I don't think there's anything to suggest we've got an unusually large number of out-of-town people sitting on buildings. But I'm not 100% on that.
Thank you. Councillor Kent?
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is, do we have any evidence whatsoever that the rate remission would do anything at all to promote redevelopment of the CBD?
Probably a couple of responses. One, the next 6 months, a key part of that process will actually be looking at the effectiveness of the policies where they've been used elsewhere. So at the moment we've highlighted where councils have the policies. The next 6 months we actually need to understand, as you say, whether they've been effective. The other element I think we'd say is, look, we would want reasonable evidence to be satisfied it was likely to make a difference. But what we're also suggesting is that a pilot approach may well be the answer anyway. So have a look, see what evidence we can find, but also potentially come back and be prepared to try. But again, that'll be a decision for the new council with options.
Well, if we haven't at this stage got any evidence and we're only going to look at the evidence, surely we should do that before we go and ask the developers how much of a handout they want.
Look, I guess there are always different approaches. Certainly my view would be that the people with the most skin in the game are the building owners and the developers, and we should be talking to them and understanding what they'd like to see. As you say, we know where their interests are. We know we need to balance that with wider interests as well. But fundamentally, my view is we're better to talk with the people with the skin in the game and come back to you with a clear understanding of what they want.
Thank you, Henry. We do have the Chamber here at present, and I just wondered if they might have a view on that at all. Good morning, John. Would you just want to come up, perhaps? It's really good to have you here. Good morning, Bryce. Yes, if you'd like, just both of you like to come up, because this is something that we're concerned about, obviously, and so thank you, councillors. I'd like to. I mean, if talking about skin in the game, well, here you go.
Yes, yep. Look, we've had quite a few hui with our developers in town. Yep, as you can hear me okay now. So we've had a number of meetings with developers in town. Henry did a really a very good answer to your question, Councillor Kent, about making sure that we go through a pilot process and that it's tested and there's evidence attached to it. But the other thing I'd add to that is this is a zero-sum game. So if we don't get any investment in the town, what you get in terms of rates coming in are going to be set at that old value anyway. So what we're looking at doing is creating an environment where investors come to town, they do invest, and then over a period of time that investment will return rates over the longer period of time. When you're looking at making an investment in any area, the investment is made up on a risk and return basis. So if you've got any changes in the cash flows that are available to you in your investment decision, it all helps. And even the little bits make a huge difference. At the moment, Tauranga, for example, has a very high development fee that's attached to their investment cost. And they can do that because they're trying to control growth, they're trying to bring growth down in actual fact. In this area, there is no development fee, and that definitely makes a difference to the proposition when people are bringing the investment decision to the city. Now, likewise, this city doesn't demand high rental rates or lease rates because it's in a state where there's a bit of work to be done, to be honest. If you were to walk up and down the streets, we've still got the same problem that Henry was talking about, where we've got some assets that have not had any investment in them or replenishment for that 25 years where we had stagnation in our economy. And we're suffering from that. We've still got assets that are sitting there that need 25 years of investment and replenishment. So unless we, get smart, we try and create, this is only one mechanism, and through the Chamber and through our investor group, we'll be encouraging other ways of getting investors into the city to make a modern city that, as Henry said, moves away from the traditional big retail footprint and moves into a modern city with inner city living that's got a hub and vibrance that we want.
Then surely wouldn't we be better to be looking at what is actually wrong with the CBD first before we go sticking plasters on like this? We've got a major review of the CBD coming up. I believe that we should actually be doing that review, finding out what the issues are, what the problems are, what's holding back development, what development needs to take place before we start going offering handouts to people.
Thank you. We have been looking at the CBD and for quite some years, actually. Quite some years. That's part of the reason why the revitalisation started.
Yes, Madam Chair, but we haven't got it right, have we?
No, and of course it's not unique just to Rotorua either, I might add. So, sorry, Your Worship, yes.
Question, probably through you, Henry, to the Chamber. I can remember the advocacy about the business differential in 2013 when we all thought, yay, this will do it, this will unlock revitalisation. We did everything we could possibly do, but the differential didn't really bring in the people that we thought. And so something's wrong in that mix of, incentives really. And I'm glad you're going out and that will go out now in a quiet time and in transition to actually say what might be the other hocks that might need to go into an incentives package, because we all truly believed that that business differential was just going to set those buildings alight. I thought we'd see investment in inner city housing and second and third floor investment, but it didn't happen. So if we do this now, do you think that'll put the signals right for investors in the next generation of the CBD?
Yeah, look, I do support Councillor Kent's view that we do need to have, a master plan. I think a master plan would be very, very useful, and I think that needs, a lot of input from the property sector. That would then give us a really good understanding of what sort of mechanisms we can put in place that would encourage investment into the right areas in a way that we want, the design of the city to meet, future needs. So I fully support what you're proposing there. For now, though, we probably got another couple of years of economic growth, and I think, all indicators on the horizon is there is a bit of a black cloud just not too far away, and we need to do everything we possibly can to keep the momentum going right now for this moment. When we go into our next period, and things always happen in a cycle, and it's a 10-year cycle, and our economists are saying that we're likely to have a little bit of a slump in a couple of years' time. So during that next slump period of time, we need to, and it's great as a council, you've got a lot of investment in this area with the projects going on. That'll help reduce the impact of that slump. But, as we move through that, we need to, have other mechanisms and our review in place so we capture the next rise. And it will rise again. This is a city that is and has had a significant image change for our New Zealand population. We had an image in the past that was, as an employer, the perception was very much this is not a desirable city to come and work and play. That's completely flipped on its head. I've got my staff coming to me, coming to Deloitte because they know it's a great place to play and to live. So that's a serious change in the image of our city. That alone has an economic drive to it because we've just got population coming in, and it's going to be self-fulfilling to an extent. So we've got to keep that going. Keep it going through the harder times. So the mechanism we're talking about today is just one of many things that we actually need to do that will meet the master plan. And as I said before, it's a zero-sum game. You're not giving anything away. The only thing you're doing is incentivising people to really think hard about the investment decision into the city. And I'll stress that, into the city where the investment needs to be done. So if the investment doesn't happen, your rates stay exactly the same. And what we want to do is recognise that's our zero-sum game, and move on from there and collect over a period of time.
Oh, thank you very much for that explanation. That's very good, good information for us. Now, there's quite a number of people want to make a comment. So, Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've sat around this table for the last 5.5 years, and the constant thing has been city revitalisation, and yet today we're hearing another version of it. Have you got any answer to the fact that the amount of money that we invested in the inner city by way of the things like the cycleway, the art, the removal of the police presence, and the removal of council presence in the middle of town, do you think any of those things has improved the inner city?
Well, look, there's, in the last 10 years, this is just my personal view and not a chamber view, so I'll just sort of put it in that sort of context. I've been living in this city for close to 30 years, and, the whole Eat Street, that concept, the investment that the council has made, and the investment that you're about to make on the lakefront and the other areas, and it's fantastic for the business community. It gives us a sense of pride, a sense of that people are really wanting to be here, and that sense gives you the ability to de-risk your investment decision. So if you've got confidence, it's about confidence. A lot of investment decisions are about confidence, and if you see as a potential investor and property owner, if you see confidence in the city and the coming from, and it's got to be led from you guys to a large extent, and I'm pleased you have done that, that confidence breeds more confidence, which breeds more confidence, and so you have the ability for investors to come in and put their money at risk, which is what you're asking of us. You're asking us to put our money at risk and make sure that we can get a return on that investment over a period of time. So I haven't answered your question directly. I can say from my perspective that we are starting to build a city that's starting to look a lot better. And we need to keep that
Yeah,
momentum.
thank you. And it does require investment.
It does.
Yes, and it does require confidence from this around this table. If we don't show it, then nobody else will in the city. So thank you, Councillor Gould.
Chair, thank you, Henry, for the report. My question to you is on page 16, 7.3, which quotes, in addition, risk will be reduced by careful engagement and consultation and by establishing a change as a trial, in brackets, with review in the first instance. How long is the review going to be? And is the consultation going to be open to the public, or are you going to restrict it to business owners as against the ordinary general public?
In terms of the question about how long the review or how long a trial might be, that will be a subject of the conversation over the 6-month period. You know, we could throw some potential dates out at you or some potential timeframes, but I think that's part of the discussion. Like, what would actually be a time frame to get some meaningful information? But partly to address Councillor Kent's issue is, if you're putting something in place, can you see the difference it's making? So whether it's 5 years, whether it's 3 years, I don't know. We would need to have the conversations to work out what would be most effective on a trial basis. But I think the point really is we would be, if it was put in place, committed to running as a trial and reviewing and looking at the evidence of the difference it was making. In terms of the consultation, again, I think that's part of building the process going forward. Obviously, the key focus is trying to get movement on where we've identified the priority in the spatial plan around the inner city. And the key focus would obviously be on the building owners and developers, but it's not to say others wouldn't be engaged, but that's part of something we need to be thinking about.
Is another question going to come with the consultation to do with the rates review for the business sector? Would that be included?
Look, who frankly knows what would come out of a consultation? At the moment, the options we're talking about are around rates remission policy. It's not to say a whole lot of other stuff won't come out of the conversation.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson and then Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, if it's okay with you, I'll make a comment. I'll indicate I'm happy to move part 2 of the resolution, and I'll also have a couple of questions. So I partially agree with Councillor Kent, but I disagree. I think Council has it right with the inner city, subject to getting our transport plan finalised. But the way we're going with the lakefront, I think we've got the momentum there. But Rotorua Inc. doesn't have it right for the CBD. And council doesn't own the levers to make it right. It's the private property owners, the developers. And look, recently, Her Worship Councillor Gould and I went on the laneways tour of Wellington. It was exciting to see the development in the Wellington CBD on a Sunday. The place was just absolutely buzzing with people walking around the inner city. And the Wellington Council has its housing policy sorted, and they're building units in the inner city, and they have 34 special housing areas. So my question at the end of this bit of rant to Henry is, where do SHAs sit as a lever that we could potentially utilise in the inner city? The other thing is, and I've always said, the way to get vibrancy in the inner city is to populate it. So I fully support where we're going with part 2 of the resolution. And in response to Councillor Gould, public consultation means public will have a say. But the other thing is that not all the developers are the property owners out there. I just raised that, and I hope there's engagement with the infrastructure owners who also pay rates on their infrastructure, such as Unison, because Unison's infrastructure has been signalled as a block to development in the inner city as well. So I hope there'll be good engagement with Unison when this policy comes back to the next council. So yeah, just with those few words, Madam Chair, I'm fully in support of part 2.
Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and pretty excited this morning. having stayed up to watch New Zealand, the Black Caps beat India. So quite buoyant, and I'm quite excited also to hear that this might be a short meeting. It means I can go out and play some good golf, finally, after all that much rain. Anyway, getting back to what it's encouraging to see that the problem is identified, and that we're trying to sort of look forward as to see how we can mitigate the slump, as John, you've mentioned, that could be coming on the horizon. A couple of questions that I've got is, what is Rotorua Economic Development's role in this? Have they ever prepared a report to say that this is the way we can go forward? And the other thing is, there are a lot of earthquake-prone buildings in the CBD, and a lot of them have been slept till 2040 to finish the work. That means there's another 21 years before they can get energized, encouraged, or forced to do something. How do we go about making these landlords becoming? Yeah. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. What can we do to say? Because a lot of them will turn around and probably tell us that financially they're constrained, or no, we have till 2040. We're not going to do anything about it. And the other thing that we've been mentioned is the relaxation maybe of the development levy for investors into the city. But in the suburbs, we do not sit with this. We want development. So how does that sit in with the model that we're trying to do? Do we have on one side of the city saying, yes, we want development levy for infrastructure, for stormwater and everything, and then on the other side we're saying, no, we don't. So for the richer we have one, for the poorer we have one. How do we decide that? And also, I'm just wondering if there is a successful model, as Deputy Mayor Dave Donaldson has just mentioned that Wellington's got it right. Is there a successful model for us to sort of look at? Because I fully empathize with what Councillor Kent has said today, and I fully understand, because I've lived in the city, had a development, did a business, and stayed in the city for 5 years as well. And I can certainly see where it's changing. So it's good, the first problem is identifying it. It's like when you say you're an alcoholic and you go, no, you're not, but you're drinking every day. So until you admit that there is a problem, you can't really go forward.
Thank you. There were a number of points that you've raised there. And I don't know, Henry, whether you want to, is there anything there that you'd like to comment on? I do know that Jeff's our CEO's got a few things he'd like to comment on too.
Yeah,
Thank
look,
you.
I can just touch on just a couple of things Councillor Kumar talked about. The first one probably was the reference around earthquake-prone buildings. And look, absolutely that would be a driver for trying to do something different, because you're right, at the moment, the legislation around that gives a long period of time to building owners to take any steps. So we would see this as another potential mechanism to encourage that to happen more quickly. And it's certainly a barrier for people at the moment to actually upgrade the buildings. And if you're looking at change of use, particularly of a commercial building to an apartment building, that triggers the need to undergo the renovations and the upgrades around earthquakes as well. So if this helps to incentivise that would be another real bonus of the process. The other thing you talked about was, how do we differentiate between the city and the suburbs? And I guess the response I'd give at this stage is saying that the spatial planning process we went through as a district really did identify the inner city as a priority, and identified the changes that need to be made, or the end point we want to see. And really, this is about saying, look, let's explore what new mechanisms we can put in place to help drive those things. And I think again, Councillor Kent and John are right. A master planning approach is right, but the spatial plan does signal a couple of key things really in terms of trying to drive particularly more accommodation, more people into the inner city, and also around the footprint. And the mechanisms we've got, they're longer term and they're bigger. They're district plan changes, they're rating, their rating issues, and we're suggesting at this stage let's develop some options for consideration by the new council.
Thank you, Henry. Yes, Jeff, you had a few.
Look, if I can make a number of comments through the chair. Look, I haven't got in front of me the precise figures, but I want to answer three things really. One is, has anything changed in the CBD? And John has already made some comments, and I just want to expand a little bit on that. The second is the question about direction of change. How does council influence change in the CBD? And the last is a little bit of a discussion around what sort of levers do we actually have that can influence change. So firstly, has any change taken place? And I'd refer you back to the Telfer Young reports that have been published since 2013. Now, I don't have in front of me the precise numbers, but in 2013, I believe there were approximately 85 empty shops in the CBD at the time, so that was a significant number. Now that dropped significantly to its lowest point in 2017, where there were 54. So in other words, there was a lot of occupancy taken up in the CBD over that period, 2013 to 2017. More recently, there has been a small increase, and I think we've all seen that in the CBD, and I think approximately the current numbers in 2018 are 59. So there actually has been an increase in empty shops, but it is nowhere near the level that it was in 2013. So obviously things have changed over that period. The other change that has actually also taken place that I don't think we should lose sight of is that actually there has been a lot of building redevelopment that has actually taken place in the CBD over the last few years. I'd point you to, for example, the ACC building that has been relatively recently developed by Ray Cook, amongst a number of others. And if we walk across the CBD today, you'll see that there are at least 3 to 4 new redevelopments that are underway as of today. Now, I'd stress that Rotorua did not see that level of redevelopment in the CBD prior to 2013. So clearly there has been change since that period, and clearly the interventions and the changes both in the economy but the interventions of council has made a difference. Something happened positively. Now, I think the question that I have heard debated by the chamber is, and indeed in this setting, is the speed of change. We're seeing change, but we're not seeing it necessarily happen as fast as what we would like. Council to date has set a new direction, and that's in the spatial plan. There is a question though about the level of detail of planning that council can go to here. Yes, we can develop very detailed structure plans, but the question is, what influence have we got to make those plans a reality? Because at the end of the day, we don't own those buildings, we don't own the land underneath them, and it is only the owners of the land and of the buildings that at the end of the day can make a decision to redevelop or not. And so how do we influence change? So we can look at other cities, and we can see Wellington as an example, where they have developed, if you look at the Wellington public spaces, the waterfront, the CBD environment, there's been a lot of public investment into the public spaces to make it more attractive. There's a new roading strategy being developed for Wellington currently, and in addition to that, Wellington Council also has a rates incentive scheme, as we're discussing today. If you go further though, and those sort of schemes prove to not work, then there are further steps that councils can also take though. But as we take those steps, we become more and more interventionist in the way that we have to work. And I point you to the Amity project in Auckland around the Panmure CBD. Panmure, if you go back now a few years, was in a very, very poor state. Now, the Amity project was a project where council directly intervened, actually as a purchaser and owner of land. That's what the Amity project was all about at the end of the day. It was necessary to directly intervene through the purchase and acquisition of property. And once that is, of course, achieved, then you can directly intervene, you can do detailed design because you are then the builder and the controller of development. But where you intervene is very much dependent on where you are and where your starting point is and what you're seeing happen in front of you. So councils, when you see them acting across the country, what they're effectively looking at is saying, are we in a moribund failure state? Do we really need to gain direct control and start developing ourselves? Or are we at a much better state than that? We're actually seeing development happening, as we are in Rotorua, and what we need to do is to answer the question, how do we encourage more of this? And that's where Wellington is up to. And so they are not looking at intrusive interventions, they're looking at interventions to encourage development. And I believe that's what's been put to you today, that the Rotorua CBD has moved a long way forward from what it was in 2013. But the problem statement I think today that I've heard is that actually we're not moving as fast as what we'd like to. So how do we encourage faster development? And effectively what the proposition today is, let's go to the developers, those who have developed, let's understand what motivates them to undertake development, and if this scheme, such as a rates incentive scheme, comes back from their potential to say, yes, this would actually encourage us to do more, then the question for the next council is, do you wish to do this? So as I think Henry and John and Bryce have outlined, this is actually putting effectively another tool in the toolbox, and from my perspective seems to fit the nature of the problem that we're facing today. We're not in a situation where there is no development. There is development in the CBD, and we've got some good, better occupancy rates than certainly what we had in 2013. So this is a potential intervention which we want to check out with those who have actually undertaken development and may prove a tool to actually encourage development happening at a faster rate.
Thank you, Jeff. I was just sitting here thinking, well, maybe we should have been talking to those in the city first, as Councillor Kent was perhaps alluding to. Do that first. I mean, I appreciate that this is something that we can do now, but I was just wondering, are we putting the cart before the horse? But however, there's still some other comments and councillors that would like to. Mrs. Trumper? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. I suppose one of the comments that I'd like to make is that on Cameron Road in Tauranga, one of the regrets they had is that they opened it up to commercial development instead of pushing them into town. And that didn't incentivise people, because most of your office workers are where the shopping will come from for your inner city. What measures will be put in place to, I suppose, incentivise or discourage, depending on which route you want to choose, the current commercial enterprises south of Randolph Street and in that block, that, you know, there are a significant number of residential homes being converted into businesses? What encouragement can be explored to actually start bringing them back into town, or is that going to be part of this review?
Through you, Madam Chair. Look, I think that's quite it's quite a specific question, probably related around the Whakato block. And at the moment, there are district plan rules that essentially, and I may need again Councillor Kent or Hunt jumping in here, but which essentially allow the existing activities to continue where they are, essentially as existing use rights, but they will end. So there's a sinking lid on what can happen to encourage, so if you're looking at change of use, you will need to essentially end up residential in those places. So there is a planning incentive or disincentive in terms of development outside the inner city block, and that's another one of the tools, but it's a slow-moving tool again.
Thank you. Yes, Jeff.
Look, I think that Henry's answered the question substantially, but early on that was identified that the CBD was in fact bleeding activity out into outlying areas. So there was a district plan change to prevent that was actually put into place. So we're in a fortuitous state. What I would say is that if you are a developer looking to develop, for example, an administrative function or activity, a 2 or 3 story building that is going to be used for administrative purposes, it is effectively a non-complying activity outside of the CBD already. So that was the measure that was actually put into place to constrain that sort of development happening outside of the CBD. And indeed what we've had over the last few years now is a number of challenges to that. There have been developers that have wanted to actually undertake development in buildings outside of the CBD of that nature, and fundamentally they have not been able to.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. I think it's really important to remember this is a 25 to 30 year problem we're addressing. It's not going to be fixed overnight. So that's one thing. And I think that we're not on a fire sale. So the idea of, and many developers have said that actually, that we've been a victim of our own success in the things we have done because now property prices have increased. We know that the things that have been happening since 2013 have encouraged our early adopters. So our developers who have land banked properties, and we know them all around the edges particularly, have already started doing major refurbs, rebuilds and complete new builds in those places. So I think most people would know if you look around the fringes of the area, Fenton Street, Ranolph, all of those areas, Tutanakai, Whakawi, that started to happen. So the low-hanging fruit were addressed. Now, the Chamber of Commerce has already addressed the fact that we have had our reputation flipped. Now, Councillor Bentley asked, he's left the room, what's happened with the money we've spent? Well, I think if you looked at the money spent, it's actually a very small amount of what Council's budget is. And it went on making changes that people could feel. So it changed how people felt in the CBD, it changed whether they felt unsafe or safe, it changed the aesthetics of the CBD, and it changed the amenity. So while they were small changes, they were enough to stimulate some reduction in empty buildings and some moving around. So this, I see, is a carrot, this policy we've got ahead of us. It's another thing to try and stimulate that next tranche of activity. So not so much the early adopters, but the next people who've been just waiting and seeing to see what would happen. Now, Council, we don't own the buildings. We can do the roading, we can do the traffic, we can manage the environment, we can change the lighting, we can manage those things, but the actual occupancy of those buildings, how they look when they're earthquake strengthened, that's out of our control. But what we can do as a council is we can try to be innovative. And we've heard of cities, and Councillor Kumar asked about a successful model. Well, we know our night market actually is seen as a successful model for night markets around the rest of the country. We know Eat Street's seen as a successful model. And there's a number of other models we can look at, like the laneways. But do you know what one of the biggest stumbling blocks is? Is when an innovative idea comes to this table, and when some people in the community, like we had the Inner City Focus Group, led by Mike Steiner and other retailers, and raising the bar, when those innovative projects come to this table, many of them are blocked. And they're blocked by my fellow councillors sitting around here.
Point of order.
And, excuse me, I don't believe there is one.
No point of order.
There is no point of order.
Carry on. Thank you.
So if this council chooses to do something of change and chooses to be innovative and chooses to try some new things, as many people do, they're not all going to work. And they're not, some will work 75%, some will be 100% success. Some will have grumblings and finally get there, and the people living there won't see them as working as everybody outside will. And I think sometimes our city and our residents and our councillors actually need to stand back visit a few other places, do a bit of global research if you're not travelling, and look at our own city, come home and look at what we've got. Because by goodness, everybody else's that's coming here, young people are moving home, families are moving here, businesses are able to attract because of those changes. Now, I'm not saying we've solved it. It's a 25 to 30 year turnaround. It's a slow move. But we're doing what we're doing, and this council is responsible for making decisions to facilitate that, not to block it. And there have been many projects, in my experience, that have struggled and have had their wings clipped and have been less than they could have been because of penny pinching and small-mindedness. Now, if that continues to be an issue around this table, we're going to continue to stumble along. This council and these elected members need to have the courage to make some bold decisions and not sit on their hands and wring and be afraid of change. Change is coming. Do we want to be part of it? Do we want to lead some of it? Or do we want to continue to limp along and have issues? So I believe that this is a good carrot. I'm happy to second the motion. And I think that we've signalled to our community with the spatial plan where we're going at a high level. We've signalled, yes, a master plan's a great idea, but it needs the support from this table to make it go ahead. And that needs to change. And we own it. We've done a 2030 vision, all of those things. What's changed in our community? If you haven't noticed change, then you've had your head in the sand. And because there's been significant change, because everybody else around the country's noticed it. Rotorua Economic Development is showing, with our tourist numbers coming through here, with our housing prices going through the roof, we have never seen, there was one 3 days ago about what suburbs have gone up. I've lived here for nearly 28 years. I have never seen headlines in the paper, week after week, over the last year or so, or since 2013, with the most positive headlines about where this city is heading. And anyone who doesn't get that this is a city on the move, really, they're asleep. So, yep, that's right. So if you want to go somewhere quiet, then leave, because this is not a quiet town. This is a town that's growing. So I think this is a great recommendation up here to look at it and to see if this carrot works. So I'm happy to second that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor Hunt. They're good words, and you're absolutely right. Thank you. Councillor Kent, I'll leave you with the last points for discussion or comments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. There's a few issues there that I'd like to address now that we're actually in debate mode and not asking questions. The first point about those around this table blocking progress with the CBD and everything else, I would like to point out that I'm an ex-retailer with 30 plus years international experience in retail consultancy. I approached Mike Steiner when the group was being formed to offer my services to assist. I was told he wasn't remotely interested because he was backing the mayor. Right? So let's put that one to bed for a start. What's wrong with the CBD? Where are we at? Yes, things are improving. Yes, things are on the go. Yes, we've done a lot of right things, but we've done some wrong things as well. As far as the CBD is concerned, we've got to stop living in the past. You cannot approach retailing in the CBD the way it's been going for the last 30, 40, 50 years. You are now dealing with the internet, where people look up everything online, check out the cheapest option, probably go and try it on in a shop, and then go and buy it online. Now, if you want to know what's going to pull the CBD out of it, you've got to look to the only successful model that works internationally. That successful model are the malls, the big malls. What do they do that's different? Well, the first thing they do is they have convenient, free parking. That's number one. People do not pay to park and they don't like walking. Secondly, they have event space and lots of it, and they have constant events going on to attract people there. Not the shops attracting them there. It's the events that they're going on. It's the fashion parades. It's the street art. It's the buskers. It's all the things that make people want to come and see what's going on. Shopping is secondary. That creates foot traffic. And if you don't think foot traffic is important, I've spent half my life developing software for loyalty programs tracking foot traffic and its impacts on retail. I still do so for various clients in Singapore. It is critical to determine where your foot traffic flows are and what's stopping those traffic flows. Once you've got foot traffic, retailers will want to come there and developers will want to develop. Because if you've got the foot traffic in the first place, everyone wants to be in that space because that's where you're going to make the money. So I'm saying we've got to have a proper plan. We've got to address the issues of transport. For example, our transport around the city is atrocious. Where's our free bus actually circling the CBD so that people can hop on and hop off and get from one end to the other without having to go and shift their car? These are simple little ideas that can be implemented. What I'm saying here, loudly and clearly, is this is a little band-aid. Let's actually address the problem properly for once. Yes, that will be part of looking at the solution, but unless you actually take a step back and figure out what is actually wrong, what's causing the problem, and fix it, and I've made some various suggestions publicly before that no one's even bothered to even ask me about further, but if you actually sit back and look at the issue properly, you'll come up with a solution which will make developers want to come into the city. And yes, you may need to give them rate rebates, but that's later. The first step is, how the hell do we fix the problem? Not stick band-aids on it. So I'm voting against this.
Thank you. And the last comment, thank you, Your Worship.
We are debating.
Yes.
So
yes.
I'm sort of sad to hear that, because I live in this city and I do use it, and I'm around the inner city all the time, like all of the other councillors around this table, Councillor Kent. And actually all of those activities that you mentioned that bring vibrancy are happening. I wonder if you're going to colour the night tonight that brings thousands of people into town. I wonder how many people go to the night markets. I wonder how many people enjoy the Sunday market in Te Manawa. These are outstanding events that visitors to our town say, how did you do it? So let's not beat
If you
up
had
on
the
one
right
another.
space, with respect, if you had the right space, it would be an all-day market.
Right, so what we're looking at here is what are the levers of opportunity that the next council can grab and move. And Councillor Donaldson and I haven't got very far either about inner city housing, because that's something that we hope to see after this work is done with investors, with developers and with those who live and have businesses in this town. And I think it's a great opportunity. I don't mind as the leader of this town saying we did the first generation and revitalisation. Thank you, Councillor Hunt, it's been magnificent. And I don't mind saying some things weren't right. We've admitted the Green Corridor, now that we've got Amaho Street and the lakefront development, we've got an east-west juncture. So let's have a look at the way traffic moves around this town. Let's be really bold and say perhaps we need pedestrian access right through town and turn it into a promenade. This is the time for us to look at the big suggestions just like you make. But I wouldn't vote against it, Councillor Kent. You've been seen as progressive. You've been seen as understanding the district plan and the spatial plan, which are the settings that stop that development out in the suburbs and say, no, no more. We need to get that sort of activity in the heart of the city and reduce our footprint down. I think it's bold. I really congratulate the Chamber of Commerce for bringing this to us. You mentioned it when we had a meeting with you, with your board, and you also mentioned climate change, and well done on that one. A brave council makes bold decisions based on good, sound research and planning tools, and that's exactly what this recommendation will allow a new council to do. And I really thank the Chamber for bringing it to our attention today, because the next 12 weeks are going to be crazy with everybody suggesting all sorts of outrageous things. But actually, never forget, we had a plan, We came in on a perfect storm, as the CEO said. We have got great movement. We should be so proud of ourselves. And people are choosing to come and live and work here for lifestyle options, and they love the place and they love the changes. Be proud of it. But this is another tool that might make it go a bit faster. So I'm happy to vote in favour of this recommendation.
Thank you very much. Look, we've had a lot of discussion on this. Before I put the motion, it has been moved and seconded. John, Bryce, any comment from you, being Chamber? You've heard the discussion.
No, I think I've said everything that needs to be said. You're quite right, Councillor Kent, in terms of the master plan, and we at the Chamber Board have discussed this before, that we would be willing to either lead or participate in the development of a master plan, because we do see that as being such an important part to the future, and also support the discussion around bringing all those businesses and being quite draconian's the wrong word, but being very clear about bringing business into the city to create that economic hub and that vibrancy that is really needed and required of any good city. So support all of that. I would also just sort of re-emphasise what I said before, though. It'd be great to have support from Council to look at this proposition that we're putting forward, because when I've talked to the property developers, and that includes myself, this does have an impact on our business decisions. It seems like a very small concession. Like I said, it's a zero-sum game, but it will do something right now. So, and doing lots of the small steps in the right direction will get us to the end goal. So this is one small step along that path. It's not the total answer, I get that, and we do want to either lead or participate in a master plan.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for coming along this morning and for your comments too. It's been very helpful for the discussion. Thank you, councillors. We have a mover and a seconder, Councillor Donaldson and Councillor Hunt. So that the committee recommends to Council to progress a revised rates remission policy to encourage development in the inner city, including a process of stakeholder engagement and public consultation. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Certainly. Recorded, yes, I think. Was that you too, Councillor Kumar? Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded. So it's passed, thank you, with 2 people recorded against, Councillor Kumar and Councillor Kent. Thank you, that's carried. Where are we? Thank you. Recommendation 2, the appointment of Commissioner to the Rotorua District Licensing Committee. May I have a mover and a seconder, please, to receive that report? Thank you, Mrs. Trumper. Thank you, Councillor Donaldson. It's been moved and seconded that we receive the report. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. Contrary? Thank you. Carried. Good morning, Nevin. Good morning.
Your Worship, councillors and board members. The purpose of this report today is to ensure that the functions and powers of the District Licensing Committee continue through the election period and for the period after the elections. As you're aware, Councillor Hunt has stated that she won't be standing for council coming up, and we need to ensure we have a commissioner appointed so that the functions can continue to operate. We did this last election. It was done by the Chief Executive, and this is just a continuation of that process. I'm happy to take the report as read and answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, it's quite self-explanatory in the report. Councillor Bentley.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I believe that Councillor Hunt at the moment has a conflict of interest here and she should retire from the table.
I have chosen not to, Councillor Bentley. This is in public. I can watch it online. I will answer any questions. I obviously won't be voting on the recommendation, but I don't believe that there's a conflict or any point in me leaving the room when I can simply watch it on live stream.
Thank you. I'm happy to accept that. Thank you. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a point of clarification in terms of the appointment being for a period up to 5 years. That's we're appointing her as a commissioner for a period of up to 5 years, not appointing her as a chair for 5 years, are we?
So the functions, through you, Madam Chair, the functions of the Commissioner is the chair of the committee. So you can either have a chair as a member of the local authority or a commissioner. You don't have both under the Act.
But is the election of the chairperson specific to a time period or not?
The appointment is for a period up to 5 years. That's your choice to recommend to the Chief Executive to make that appointment.
Okay, but if say, for example, a new council came in and they wanted a different chairperson who was equally qualified or whatever, was a member of the council, how would that stand if Councillor Hunt has been appointed for 5 years?
There'd be no issue at all on that. So what we're recommending in here is that the appointment be made for up to 5 years, but when the new council's ready to make a more permanent decision, if you like, presumably in the new year, they can make whatever decision they want at that time. So it's certainly not locking in and saying, look, this is a 5-year appointment. It's simply saying, look, you've got the flexibility. It's up to 5 years, but fundamentally the new council will decide to make up.
Thank you for clarifying that. On that basis, I'm happy to move the resolution.
Any further discussion? Yes, Your Worship.
I certainly support it, and I think it's great that you asked for that clarification. There's been some criticism externally of us appointing people in a period of transition, but I think that clarification is certainly helpful, and I certainly support it. I have found those skills to be outstanding, and it would have been so sad to lose those skills.
Thank you. But I do think, and I think you're right, Your Worship, but it would be nice to anybody coming in the new term, if somebody's got an interest in this, that over a period of time they could move in and assist in this route, because it's very knowledgeable, very good to have that knowledge. Councillor Bentley, you wanted to thank you.
Thank you, Thank you, Madam Chair. Nevin, is this an indication of our council's inability to plan for the future, and that at the moment we've got a representation on the committee of a total of 6, so we've got 2 councillors, and this is going to reduce it to 1 councillor, 1 elected official in the future. And I think a prudent council would follow procedure and appoint a chair for 12 months, so that the new council can get 6 months to settle in and before making a decision as to who should be carrying out the chair's job. And have we been to the market, so to speak, to find out the quality of people that are out there that also could fit into this position? Or is this an in-house appointment?
Through you, Madam Chair, and I'll respond to that. Look, what we're trying to do here is actually plan for the future. There's an inherent piece of uncertainty on any committee where elected members are specified. What we've got at the moment is a district licensing committee that I think has 3 or possibly 4 members of the community as committee members, 2 elected members. Neither of those elected members may be there after the election, so the council will need to think in the new term what makeup it wants. So I think this is just a normal process in terms of whether there's someone else out in the community with the experience to step in now and to cover the chairing role over the next 6, 12 months, whatever it is. I'd pretty well say no. This is a relatively risky area for the council. It's quite complex legally. It requires a good understanding of process as well as the substance around the sale of liquor legislation. And what we're talking about here is really keeping the council safe through the transition and allowing a new council then to have a think about what's the makeup of the committee going forward. So I think, I'll push back and say rather than unplanned, this is really quite planned.
Thank
So
you.
I take it from that answer that you have or you have not ascertained whether there's anybody else out there that's capable of carrying out this job?
We go through a process whenever we're appointing new committee members of advertising and asking. We've got 3 or 4 members on the committee at the moment. None of them have the experience to be chair.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor, yes, thank you. I've got some of them. Yeah, Councillor Gould.
Chair, Henry, question please. You've got a couple of elected officials, you've got 4 lay people appointed. After the election, what's stopping the council appointing Karen Hunt as a layperson on that committee, as chair of that committee?
The legislation only allows an elected member or a commissioner to be the chair.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson, then Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I'm just a bit disappointed there's no planning, just in case I don't get re-elected and we need a new trustee on the Kauai Cemetery Trust. But seriously though, my question is, I fully support the recommendation, but the existing District Licensing Committee chaired by Councillor Hunt, has there ever been a successful appeal against any decision of that committee?
No, through you, Madam Chair, since 2012, when this was instigated, through all the hearings, we had 1 appeal for the Rotorua hot pools, and Judge Kelly, who is the chair of ALA, said that the decision of the DLC was well reasoned and struck out the appeal.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell?
I wholeheartedly support the recommendation that's up here, and I do want to ask a question, if I can, through the chair, directly to Councillor Hunt. I only assume that you're available for the position, whatever term is determined.
That will be, this is the recommendation that you're discussing now, Councillor Maxwell, is pretty standard practice around the country. Councils either decide to appoint someone independently at get-go at the beginning of new council, or they appoint a councillor to the role. Commissioner or chair, they're the same person. I have signalled that I am available to carry through this transition period. If the new council decide to, in 6 months or 12 months, debate this decision again, then obviously whatever the council decides, I will accept, because that's it's an appointment. It's not a given. If the council decided, as some do around the country, to have independent commissioner, then they may open that up for other people to apply, and I may or may not apply to that role. But that's in the future. This is a part of business in the council that continues regardless of the election.
Yeah.
To not make this safeguard would mean that the licensing aspect would come to a grinding halt, which of course puts at risk managers' certificates, businesses, licenses, hearings, all of those issues. So while it is a decision of council, it is quite a separate part from council's day-to-day business, which is why it's managed and funded through the licensing, not through rates. So it's a part of council, but at arm's length. So this is pretty much business as usual for any council around the country to make provisions for safe continuation of business as usual for as long as is required.
I think we're fortunate that you are available. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hunt. Councillor Kumar?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Nevin and Henry. Look, personally, I've only ever heard of good things about Karen as a chair of the liquor licensing, was it? I've had an experience where I had to come in front of the chair as well, and I found her to be very professional. Like I said, out in the community, as far as her work has been concerned, I've only heard good things. We probably have different views on other issues, and I would have probably wanted to remain neutral and think, hey, look, maybe I might not be here in 6 months or 3 months' time after the election, so as with the people decide. And then I would have thought that maybe the new committee would have probably made a more impartial decision. But in saying that, we have to make a decision today, and I think Karen has done a good job, and hopefully it's not seen as council nepotism to appoint the same person, because we're in favour of that. But like I said, I've heard good things about her, and from my own experience, I think she's done a wonderful job.
Thank you. Councillor Kent.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've worked with Karen substantially on the RMA committee, and I have to say that she's a highly skilled chair. She knows the legalities and ins and outs and dots the I's and crosses the T's, and I have a great deal of respect for her. I think we're extremely lucky that Karen is going to be available to follow through for us in the transition period. The fact that any incoming council, if it changes, is able to change that decision when appropriate means there is no risk whatsoever. We're fortunate to have a very skilled chair and licensing person who knows the ins and outs, knows the city, knows all the liquor outlets and so on. So I think there is no risk here at all.
Thank you. Now, it has been moved and seconded. It's been moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Mrs Trumper, that the committee recommends to Council that the Chief Executive appoint Councillor Karen Hunt to be a Commissioner under the Sale and Supply of Alcohol Act 2012 for a period of up to 5 years. I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary? Thank you. Sorry. Yes. Councillor Bentley to be recorded against. So thank you. That is, and thank you. You've abstained. Thank you. So that's been carried. Thank you very much. Nevin, if you'd just like to sit there, I understand, Nevin, that you're retiring. So we're going to, I think there was going to be a couple of words said this morning. Henry, is that correct?
Look, I was really going to put him into your hands, Madam
right.
Chair, and look, I don't want to do this every week, and I'm sorry, this is the second week in a row. But yeah, look, Nevin's probably last time in his current role before councillors. He's resigned from his role, and will be moving to Wellington in September. So really just an opportunity, I think, for you and for me in front of you, I guess, to acknowledge the amazing work Nevin has done for this district and for this council over 39 years. And more recently, obviously, in charge of the community and regulatory functions of the council. It's an enormously complex and somewhat risky area for any council to manage, looking at the areas where we often come into difficult situations with members of the community, whether it's around dogs or whether it's around noise complaints in the liquor licensing area, the parking, the guardians, the whole range of those critical regulatory functions which actually make our district a really great place to live in. And Nevin has overseen that area and led it with enormous experience and kept this place ticking on, and more than ticking on. He's done a fantastic job for the district. So just a little chance to acknowledge him, but to hand really on to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Henry, for that. Yes, listening to all of the area of work, we're really talking about relationships, aren't we? Relationships with the public, and that's a skill, absolutely. So, but there are a few people who'd like to say something. Your Worship.
Or Nevin, you can't get away, you see. You thought you might. You're not just putting a policy before us. But I'd like to thank you on behalf of the team for your exemplary professionalism, and 39 years of service is simply astonishing. And we had a great little chat about what he's enjoyed and what he hasn't enjoyed, and that's his story to tell. But I think the most telling thing about you, Nevin, was when you said you've only ever lost sleep, not on regulations imposed on you from central government that we have to enact at a local level. They're hard enough, but when they affected your staff. And you particularly mentioned animal control, and when your staff are exposed to very dangerous situations, you held personal responsibility for them. I found that very moving about your personal side, that in your professionalism you've never really shown to us. So you've come before us and you've presented things from a very fair and objective framework for us to make balanced decisions. You also did say, I think the Food Act was a particularly challenging piece of legislation that you had to shepherd through and then monitor food safety, and very tricky. But I'd like to thank you for having brought very complex issues to us and put them before us in a relatively simple way, and so that we could understand and make the right decisions on behalf of our district. And wish you well in Wellington. I can see someone will grab you down there, but he assures us that he's going to have a bit of a break from everything. And also nice to hear that you want to get involved in some not-for-profit work when you're down there. That says a lot about you, Nevin. So we wish you well, and you'll be very hard to replace. But you also had a bit of a smile knowing that you had mentored through your replacement, and that gave you a great deal of satisfaction that that was about planning for the future, and that we've got someone in very good hands that you have trained. So thank you for doing that mentorship and leadership for your own staff too, Nevin. We wish you well.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Hunt.
Thank you. I've had the great pleasure of working very closely with Nevin, particularly as in his role as Secretary of the DLC, and Nevin is highly respected nationally. In fact, he's really seen as at the top of his game in that area. And regulation, really, it's the least popular. You know, you only need to think noise, parking, dogs, district licensing, the Food Act. You're never particularly the one anyone wants to see, and when they do see you, they get then sent a bill after the visit. So Nevin has managed to be calm, considered, exceptionally knowledgeable in this area, and he's been able to steer this department and the people that he works with. And that reflects on me and my work with Nevin, because you can tell when people are working in an unhappy environment. When you go in there, and I'm in there weekly, I can see from how his staff relate to him and the guidance he's been able to give for them and for me, that Nevin, you are a man of high calibre and great integrity. And it has been an ongoing pleasure for me to establish a working professional relationship with you and a friendship over the years we've had here. I really do wish you all the best in Wellington, and this organisation's going to miss you greatly, because you have really steered us through some pretty tricky times, and that takes great skill and it takes great courage, and you have shown both of those. So I do thank you for your service. And I thank you for the guidance you have given me in what was a beginning role under the 2012 Act. People really didn't know where we were going, but we were exceptionally fortunate. I'm co-chair of a national body of DLCs in Wellington, a reference group, and Nevin's name pops up not infrequently about the skills he has and he brings, and the ability for our community to be well served by that. So that has informed how I've been able to run that committee with the community. So I do thank you for as well, and particularly the dogs. Of all the hearings that we have, they're the most emotional for the community, and it takes a great deal of skill to keep that environment safe for all members there, including the staff. So well done, and I look forward to catching up in the future.
Thank you. Oh, Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can't not make a comment. Nevin, you go with the best wishes of myself, but also my wife, who worked with you back in the day as the police licensing officer, and when you were a member of Jim Nicklin's team. And I felt very comfortable coming into this organisation, knowing that you would give us the right advice. And certainly I got that when we grappled with the LAP. Of all things, you know, that was the most confusing of technical stuff that we had to work through as a council. And so thank you for your years of service to this organisation, but also to this community, because it is making sense of regulation that is so important to the community. So best wishes.
Thank you. Well, there you go, Nevin. I don't know if you'd like to say a word or two. You're most welcome to, but certainly.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, councillors and your worship, for the kind words. It's been my privilege serving the council and the community for the 39 years that I've been part of this organisation. I've been privileged to work under 4 chief executives and 4 mayors and 13 councils. And I think, you know, we've seen the community grow from strength to strength. We've had difficult things to implement, and some of the legislation to get that over the line and to interface with our community is a big challenge. But I think also the support from the executive, and lately as Henry is my group manager, and Jeff, you know, with some of those difficult situations where we've had firearms presented to our staff, those sorts of things don't go without mention. And I think final credit to my team. You know, we have a group of very dedicated staff that have the passion of this organisation and the pride in the community they serve. And I think I was saying to Henry, you know, around 15,000 complaints my area deals with annually, and it'll be less than a handful that ever raise it up to the executive level. And most of the times it's not about the way we've handled it, it's just that they didn't like the decision that we came to. Councillor Hunt, with the work in the DLC, you know, we've had many tricky hearings, and I think likewise the regard you're held by the professional legal counsel that have represented some of the big interests in the industry, and their comments afterwards, especially in the hearings where we may have had to curtail or remove their licence, when you have legal counsel saying that was a very fair hearing and a good outcome, even though they didn't get what they wanted. So I think, again, that stands this council well within our community. I won't be leaving Rotorua totally. I will retain property here in Rotorua. My brother and his sister-in-law will be living here, so I'll still keep very much an eye on what's going on in the district. So thank you very much, and yes, it'll be a sad day.
Yes. Thank you. Well, we only have one further item, and I don't propose going into into confidential, because we just have the minutes from our last meeting. So I think I'll just put those. Oh, sorry. You're going to move them. Thank you. And it's been moved and seconded. Thank you. That the confidential minutes of the Strategy, Policy and Finance Committee meeting held on the 11th of July 2019 be confirmed as true and correct. It's been moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Donaldson, was it? Oh, Gould, thank you. So I'll put that motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, thank you, carried. So that concludes our meeting today, councillors. Thank you very much for your attendance, your worship, councillors. Pardon? Oh, there is lunch now, actually.